Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're always delighted to have this returning guest. We had to take a week off last week. Andy was out of the country, but he's back now, and we're glad to have him. Andy Schectman is the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. He's joining us for this weekly market update. And today is Tuesday, July 30th, is it?
It is. Good job.
2024. Andy, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Thanks for having me, Dunnigan. Sorry to have held you up last week, but I appreciate the pivot, and good to be back here with you this week.
Not a problem. I did get quite a few queries from viewers who are accustomed to their Tuesday night fix of seeing you here, and naturally they were anxious to have you back, and they're grateful. I even had some people texting me just in the last hour here, just making sure. So,
Appreciate
folks,
that.
if you want to get in the live chat, you want to ask questions for Andy, this is really live, and if you want to ask questions for Andy, make sure that you are connected into YouTube, that you are subscribed to our Liberty and Finance channel on YouTube, then enter the live chat that's underneath this video, and you can post your questions there for Andy. We'll try to get as many questions as possible in front of Andy during this time. One of the questions that had been asked in the week when you were gone was, with the pullback in silver, we were hopeful, many were hopeful about over the past month prior to that, when we saw what seemed to be remarkable resilience and sustaining support for both gold and silver, gold near or at all-time nominal highs against the US dollar, and silver at least above what had been previously for the past decade or so, like a glass ceiling at 30, approximately 30, and it was maintaining above that for several weekly and monthly closes. And then when it finally, there was concern and hope that people were expressing that maybe the old price fixing mechanism on the COMEX was broken now, and that physical demand was going to continue to overwhelm that. We've had Ed Steer, a good longtime friend of Ted Butler, on talking about that it looks like we're still seeing that regime of paper future contracts being used to manage the silver price, maybe the silver price more than anything else, is still in effect on the COMEX. Any new revelations from your side and your research and those that you've been talking with about that big picture of when will we see free and fair markets again to allow true supply and demand fundamentals to set the silver price?
I think it is changing. I mean, it is slowly playing by a new set of rules. It's still frustrating. Um, the massive acquisition of silver that we see coming out of China and India cannot be ignored. And why would they bitch about it if they're the ones doing all the accumulation? And they are. And there was some interesting revelations that came out of some interviews that Chris Marcus has done recently, and Vince Lancy, with some mining executives who are talking about the fact that China is buying unrefined silver concentrate from Latin American refiners and miners. This is something that's really rarely, if ever, done, and it is typically only done in times of very acute supply-demand imbalances. It's the way they talk about it, and that they are way overpaying by many times the amount that for the each ton of unrefined silver that the West would pay for it, and they're bringing it home to China, refining it there. It has no impact on the price of silver. I think it gives pause in terms of future price, in terms of where we are ultimately going. Yeah, the central banks and the commercial banks rather are still in control, but it's becoming very dangerous. And you're seeing the bleed down in all of the exchanges. We've talked about that. You're seeing the import numbers. But you're also seeing something like this, that it isn't very easy to see this, and I certainly appreciate Chris sharing this information with me, but that they're paying as much as $200 a ton more for each load of the material. That's on a per ton basis. That's a lot more, and they are refining it themselves in China, similar to the way that China said they weren't accumulating gold during the last few months, but they were, and they're buying it through proxy banks that work on behalf of the PBOC, who don't report it to the IMF. These countries who are using the suppression of the Western paper market against us, they're not causing a stink. And why would they? But what they are doing is standing for delivery and taking it any way that they can. We saw more of the same. The managed money get fleeced again. And one of these days, it's not going to happen. One of these days, the commercial banks will be on the right side of the trade. Maybe that's where they're going right now because there's such insatiable demand, physical demand for delivery. To be on the wrong side of that trade at the wrong time is a death sentence. And one of these days, I think they will hoodwink the managed money into going short. And that's kind of what you see right now, where almost 5 billion in long futures were sold by the managed money here last week, and almost 2 billion in silver futures sold. We'll find out more, I think, tomorrow with the COT numbers. It'll probably be much bigger than that. But what you are seeing is what we've always seen. The commercial banks allow the price to rise. They absorb all the buying pressure. They suck in all the speculators, and then they step on the price and lean on it and lean on it and lean on it after they've absorbed all the buying, and they rinse, wash, and repeat, and you end up fleecing the managed money who capitulates. But one of these days, when the managed money gives up, goes short, and sells all their longs, that means when they go short and sell their longs, the commercial banks take the other side of both trades, both of the short trade going long and selling their longs to the commercial banks. And that's what will happen. And I don't know when that will be, but I think that what differentiates this time from all the other times is that we're seeing such a massive bleed down. You look at the LBMA numbers, they're down to the lowest level they've ever had since they started keeping records. And it's just a matter of time before the deliveries continue to, I think, create a problem where being naked short the amount that they are is about as foolish as it can get. So, yeah, I understand the frustration. It's still much higher than it was a year ago, but breaking that 30 barrier, I think, was a gut punch to a lot of people. Ultimately, it will retest those numbers again. And ultimately, the West and the rigging banks, where 8 banks right now hold the largest concentrated short position in the history of the COMEX market in any commodity ever traded, a la that chart that Ed Steer showed, which I've got a lot of mileage out of. That speaks volumes that they're still in control, but maybe, just maybe, they're trying to slowly get out of that position, go long and make more money on the upside by hoodwinking the managed money than they ever did on the downside, and with a lot less risk.
Yeah, one of the things that Ted Butler had pointed out over the years was that he said it's remarkable. Frankly, it's I don't know what the word is, but it's scandalous how neglectful the CTFC and the other regulatory authorities that are supposed to be preventing by trying to ensure free and fair markets by preventing concentrated short positions, that sort of thing, or the actual managing of price by concentrated holders. That in fact, if you look at it through the actual outcome of what's been happening on the exchanges, the ability of that mechanism to stay in place over this extended period of time just demonstrates that they haven't been doing their job, and in fact that those who have been persisting at that never had a losing trade in, I can't remember how many years, Ted Butler said, but that was the most remarkable thing he observed, was that they were always able to come out on a winning trade. And if that doesn't demonstrate you know, concentrated power in any market, is that you can always come out with a winning trade because you actually control, which direction you're going to push it next, is something that I think everybody should be aware of. There's been this lively discussion going on in the live chat right now about whether price even matters. And some people pointing out that it's the ounces that you have, it's what you actually have that's going to emerge. People's eyes will be opened that our fixation on price has, in fact, as you've pointed out, for a couple of years, been a major distraction, very effective one, to keep our eyes off of the necessity of having the assets that you need to take you forward in the future. And that's been something we've been talking about for a long time on Reluctant Preppers on our channel, about having the assets that you need and not worrying, don't being fixated on the price, but be fixated on what it is that you're going to need to have. Any comments from you on that that
Yeah, I mean,
factor.
it's price is the biggest tool of misdirection. That's how they're able to misdirect the public with price and counter intuition. I mean, it's very frustrating. It's very difficult. I think the first thing that people need to understand is that the laws of economics and of Mother Nature will prevail. The suppression of these markets always end poorly, and this is no exception. The world is changing. The world is moving to one that puts more priority in physical commodities in their own possession than they do the currencies that purchase them. And that's what these countries are using against us. When you see India import nearly 700 million ounces of silver in the last few years from the West, and now because of they have a treaty with the United Arab Emirates that allowed them to buy over $1 billion worth of silver this year, this last year, because of the reduction in import duties just with the United Arab Emirates. Well, now we find out that they just cut import taxes totally down to 6% from 15% to stop the black market importing of gold and silver. You have one of the biggest silver purchasers in the world where it just got a whole lot less expensive for them to buy it. And these are the countries that are draining the exchanges. My mentor, Richard Russell, God rest his soul, always used to say it's the number of ounces that matter.
Mhm.
And you try and say those things, but most people would take it as gaslighting or, talking the book or whatever it may be, but it is true.
Well,
And in the end, it will prevail to be true more than you don't remember what you paid for those ounces. You just keep accumulating them when you can because it's real wealth.
Well, there's two aspects of that have pressed to the front of my awareness in the last couple of weeks. One is that my wife keeps reminding me, it's like, hey, when are we going to be able to retire? And you can look at any plan, financial plan you've got, any model you've got,
No, you
any
can't
assumption you're making,
retire.
and if it's all in the number of dollars that you're going to amass, it's like, no, any number of dollars you can write down on a paper can be made worthless, can be made, and they are being, whether it's we were counting someday when we were younger, thinking that someday we'll be able to qualify for Social Security. Well, this is the year that I could qualify for Social Security, but it does the 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 purchasing power of it has become so diminished compared to what it was supposed to be that I look back at all that I paid in and I thought, man, I paid in with a lot bigger dollars than they're paying out with these days. But the thing that occurred to me is, wow, the only thing that makes sense is to talk about how many ounces would you have to have before you could say, now, this, given our life expectancy or whatever, we think we could survive on this many ounces. Because if you do it in terms of dollars, there's nothing that makes any sense when you're in the middle of an exponentially accelerating collapse of the dollar and purchasing power. And if you look, that was number one. Number two was thinking that as you own something of true value and the fiat currency system is going down the drain at an increasing rate, when in that increase rate of devaluation of the dollar, in other words, which you could say is causing a higher and higher and higher price of the thing that you're holding on to, when would you say, oh, there it is, that's the point that I should sell? It's like, wait a minute, why would you sell something of unchanging value in the face of something that's got a collapsing value? So those are two little light bulbs that went on for me in the last month. So everybody can have a good laugh at my expense, and I don't mind it because I probably should have gone on about a decade ago. But anyway, for me, they just went on in the last month that you can't count financial independence in terms of dollars. You have to count it in terms of ounces. And number two, when would you ever trade something of unchanging value for something of collapsing value?
Look, I just think the bottom line is this. What gives me solace is I know that the majority of human population is accumulating commodities. I know that the majority of human population understands that currencies inherently are meant to die, especially those that are fiat. Ultimately, they always die. They return to their intrinsic value of worthlessness, of zero, of paper. And the slow accumulation by these sophisticated commercial central banks, sovereign wealth funds, they understand the long game. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who aren't able to, don't have the time frame to play the long game. The old saying that the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent is true. You accumulate this stuff because you see the big picture. And as frustrating as it is, you have to understand you're not buying it to become wealthy overnight. You're buying it because it is wealth. And ultimately, Mother Nature wins. You cannot suppress and continue to manipulate a market that is enticing massive global demand. It will end badly. And it's as if I think instant gratification has become so ingrained in the American psyche that it's too difficult to deal with. I don't ever lament when the price goes down, or when the price goes up. I'm not overly joyful. I just understand that over time, gold and silver will do what it's done for all of time, and that is to retain its purchasing power. But in particular, at the end of this macro system that we are in, um, it will go from 0 to 100 very quickly in terms of its speed. And what seemed like an eternity in being, stuck in a quagmire of confusion and disconnect from reality. Like, why would it not be going higher in this environment? You have to understand you have 8 commercial banks with a tremendous amount of power that are suppressing silver to the degree of the largest concentrated short position in the history of the COMEX. Why? I have my own beliefs. I really do believe it has to do with the amount of silver used in the military industrial complex, that these are very powerful players that don't want to let the price of silver get away, but the rest of the world doesn't care what they want. And when you see India and China doing what they are doing, using the suppression of price to accumulate and continue to drain, and to do it methodically, it will reach a point where the realization of being on the wrong side of this trade is a death sentence. And I do believe that. And I think they understand that already. Maybe guys like Elon Musk already understand that. Maybe they're the ones, or he's one of the ones that have been standing for delivery here in the West. I don't know. But what I will say is you just have to put your time horizons on hold and know that over an extended period of time, gold and silver will probably end up being the 2 most important assets, financial assets, that we can own in this country, as the dollar starts to really globally lose favor. And I think that's going to happen in an accelerated fashion at some point. What starts out as a trickle can very quickly turn into a flood. And I know it's frustrating. I do. I get it. I'm frustrated even having to talk about it all the time. But, it is what it is. And it just goes to show that this is a very high stakes game, one that the biggest money in the world is very afraid of letting go of. And but ultimately, you can only manipulate a market or control a market over an extended period of time by pushing in the direction that it is going. And you have the majority of human population pushing back against the West right now. So, yeah, it's a dangerous game for these commercial banks who are naked short.
Your comments earlier about the bypassing of the COMEX and other exchanges that is starting to happen. We interviewed Keith Neumeyer from First Majestic Silver. You mentioned other silver mining company CEOs talking about countries purchasing their concentrate rather than getting it
That's what I
through.
was talking about.
So
That's what it
that
is.
it's like
Yes.
at some point, the so-called price on the so-called exchanges could just become a sideshow. I mean, it's like when eyes are finally opened that those who are really accumulating the largest quantities of physical aren't even going
Well,
through
and think about that
those exchanges.
when you're buying all of that concentrate from Latin America, and that's what I was talking about. Um, when you're doing that, that's not showing up on it's not run through an exchange. It's not calculated in terms of the price. It's got a different price because it's unrefined. And if you look at the Chinese capability to refine things, well, 100% of the rare earths were refined in China last year. 100%. They weren't all mined there, but they were all refined there. And so, in terms of refining silver, yeah, it's a good idea. Buy the doré cheaper than anyone else, or more than anyone else will pay. Get it all and accumulate it all, refine it. And guess what? That doesn't show up on any official statistics. You think they're doing that with their gold too? Of course they are. They're buying gold all around the world. They're buying silver all around the world. They're buying oil all around the world. They're buying rare earths all around the world. They're doing whatever they can and doing it as privately as they can, as they should. Um, and we'll all wake up to a new reality at some point when the Western markets are observed for what they are, a Ponzi scheme. I mean, Bernie Madoff had a great operation until people said, "Give us back our money." Well, the same thing is true about a system where the LBMA is allowed to trade 3 billion ounces of silver nearly per day, yet only claim they're trading 290 million. But they only have 300 million ounces to trade, and they're trading 292 million a day, every day. But admit those numbers are 10 times undervalued because they only publish the final settlement numbers, not all of the trades that were used to get there. And so when you're trading, in essence, 3.5 times global annual mine supply per day just in London, let alone what's done on COMEX, the distortions that the West have created for a very long time have enabled them to play this game. But now the sophistication of the countries that are demanding the physical product itself and understand its relevance and importance, where it is more valuable than the dollars used to purchase it, they'll play this game until there's nothing left to be delivered off of the LBMA or the COMEX. And then that price goes from here to here like that. And you see a new system arise in Shanghai and Beijing and in UAE and in Moscow. All of the exchanges across the southern hemisphere will now price commodities themselves, just like the BRICS grain exchange. And they know what we're doing. The guy that is running the BRICS grain exchange, he made some comment like, we produce more grain than the West does, and yet we have no control of the price because it's all controlled on COMEX. Or the head of the Shanghai Metals Exchange in 2015, when the Chinese have a right to speak at the table, the real price of gold will be known. I mean, they know what we're doing, and they're using it against us slowly. The art of war: misdirect, don't even throw a punch, and they can beat us by standing for delivery. And at the same time, do they accumulate all of the commodities? They could very quickly cripple some of the biggest Western banks on the planet. Real quick, if they really stood for delivery and blow up the exchanges. Now, it doesn't serve them any purpose to do that yet. Doesn't mean it won't ultimately happen. And, I guess this is a long game that people have to see that for what it is and know that hopefully we're around to see it all play out. If not, you'll leave a legacy for your family that, we don't have to worry about going to zero.
There was a rather intriguing story that you brought forward here about a little more than a month ago about representatives from several major Western bullion banks visiting China and meeting with them, talking, or was it Russia, talking about, we don't know exactly what, but it was interesting that it was happening about the time that we saw a big reduction in JP Morgan's physical stockpile of the largest hoard of silver, at least reported in the history of the world, reducing sharply. And there was concern that perhaps those banks were over there talking about looking for help from China on meeting physical demand or helping support their pricing or whatever. But it seems like a question here from Fazdal on the chat says, has anything come out of those JPM meetings in China asking for physical silver to cover their shorts? That story disappeared.
But we don't know that that's what they did. I mean, in fairness, the Shanghai Metals Exchange, their website showed that for 4 straight weeks, you had HSBC, Standard Charter, JP Morgan, and Deutsche Bank show up. We know that they're short silver. We know that gold cannot be exported out of China, but silver can. Why would they be there? We see that that's around the time that not only did the price of silver go down, but so did the stockpiles of silver at the Shanghai Metals Exchange. And, have they been trying to get out of these short positions? I don't know. Are they trapped? I don't know. But it would seem as though that's what they were doing. They were going there saying, listen, we need help. We don't have the physical delivery to meet our redemption demands of delivery. Now, at some point, they have to get their house in order. Could this be the beginning of it right now, where they're hoodwinking the managed money to take in the other side? Maybe. I mean, who knows? There's all of these stories that have smoke emanating from them where we assume fire lies within or beneath, and maybe it does. One of these days, it's going to break. What will break it? And, Jim Sinclair always said it, and it never really made sense to me, stand for delivery, stand for delivery. He used to tell people to take delivery of COMEX bars, gold bars off of COMEX. There was a financial advisor in Minnesota who would call me and he said, look, I got hundreds of clients with 100-ounce gold bars. Can I switch them to gold eagles? Because I took them off because Jim Sinclair said I should. but in the end, Jim will be right. I mean, this is how you win. And I don't think it's the public that has the power to do that, but the sovereign nations do. And maybe the public does. You know, you look at what gold has done for a moment, and it's here again, sniffing its all-time highs, while at the same time the ETF numbers have dropped. Positive real return with interest rates and a strong dollar should be the death knell for gold. Zero participation, 1/2 of 1%, right? That's what Rick always says. And um, it hasn't. I mean, the price keeps going higher. What does that tell you? It tells me that the demand is real. But what happens when the American public wakes up and wakes up to very few alternatives? You got the Magnificent Seven turning down right now. You got the yield curve uninverting. Is that going to be a recession, just like every other uninverted yield curve has predicted for the last since 1950? I don't know. But I will say that there will come a time when um, people who have seen through all of this smoke and mirrors and have hung on to the metals for the right reasons will witness it. And you know, I used to think to myself, because because by the way, because these central banks understand that taking delivery is how you win the game. Can't do it too fast. You got to continue to play this game so they can get as much as they can at subsidized prices. But um, I I just think that day is coming, and you can't buy gold and silver with the intentions of getting wealthy. You very well may. And I used to say, be careful what you wish for. And then I started thinking about that. I mean, why can't we have $100 silver and $5,000 gold? We have what, $70,000 Bitcoin. Why not? Why can't we? You know, a Dow Jones off the hook. I mean, why can't we, with all of these inflated indices and prices in other areas? Why can't we have $100 silver? It should be. Why can't we have $5,000 gold? Does that mean the world will come to an end when that happens? No. But what it does mean is that the dollar that we value everything against is losing value. I mean, maybe we come to a place where, you know, the Fed is able to lower rates, stimulate the economy, get everything cranking again, and the stock market takes off. But in terms of ounces of gold, it will lose ground. Um, I really do believe that there is no way out of an ultimate dollar devaluation, and that you even see President Trump and his administration talking about that was what they would do. And now you got Vance saying not only would he like to devalue the dollar, but questioning the wisdom of being the world reserve currency. It sounds a little bit like Jared Bernstein. So I don't know. I just think ultimately the dollar is in trouble. And if you understand that and hold on long enough and don't have these notions of becoming wealthy tomorrow, then it's a wonderful thing to have, because ultimately you'll be proven right. It's just, do you have the patience and the ability to withstand this constant Chinese water torture? And that's what it feels like, a little drip, 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 drip on your forehead. That is driving a lot of people crazy. I understand it. We'll have our day. And the reason I know that is because the smartest money in the world continues to accumulate and take possession. And you see it if you look closely. And now when the Chinese are buying unrefined silver as much as they can, paying a much higher price for it and taking as much as they can, it tells you what they're doing. They're playing the game and beating us at our own game, and doing it as clandestine, as private as they possibly can, so as to not alert everyone what they're actually doing. And we're getting beat at our own game. We set the rules and they're beating us by those rules. And that's the thing people need to understand and relax a little bit. And over time, we will see those numbers. It's not going to be the way we drew it up in our minds.
You just made me remember something that I think people can relate to as an analogy. I'm a fan of Walt Disney and some others. And anyway, my son gave me a biography of Walt Disney for Christmas a few years back, and in reading it, now it's interesting because I moved to Central Florida here, and the story, the actual historical scenario by which the Walt Disney Company, which had already established their main studio in Burbank, California, and already had built Disneyland in Anaheim, how they were able to amass 40 or so square miles of contiguous land in Central Florida and build the world's largest tourist destination there, the world's largest resort, without triggering a run on the price of the land was through being clandestine about it and generating dozens, if not hundreds, of shell companies, that each with very innocuous names about land development or orchard development or whatever, that independently and separately bought up all these sort of distressed and rundown
The art of war, my man. That's the
uh,
art of war, the art of
uh,
misdirection. That
orange
is
orchards and everything.
pervasive.
And then after they had had all of this all bought up, suddenly it made this big press announcement. Hey, we're going to build the biggest
And that's the way it'll
thing we've
go
ever
here
built.
too. That's the way it'll go here too. And maybe it's in October if they announce the new unit token. In September, they're meeting to ratify it. Who knows? And it's 40% gold back, but so supposedly China isn't being honest about the amount of gold they have. They have so much more than we think. They've been mining 400 or 500 metric tons for decades per year with all of the trade imbalance money that we give them. And even if it was uneconomical, that alone should be more than the 2,600 metric tons they say that they have. For years back in the day, I've been doing this for 34 years, and I remember forever. 1,200, 1,200, 1,200. That's what their numbers never grew. 1,200 metric tons never grew, never grew, never grew, never grew. Chinese are lying. Chinese are lying. They have way more. And then all of a sudden they publish their numbers for 18 months and stop for 2 months. And now what do? They actually made the premium in gold negative on the Shanghai Metals Exchange to exacerbate this illusion that they're not buying, to let the price drop, right? Western media, oh no, they're not holding it up. And here it is again. They're buying it through proxies. They're not telling us any more than we have told the world how much gold we have at Fort Knox, which hasn't been audited since 53. That's exactly what they're doing. This is a high stakes game. This is a once in a generation, once in a lifetime move away from opaque promises, debt instruments, paper, to Zoltan Pozar's Bretton Woods 3. He nailed it. He's right. It's all about he who has the commodities wins. And it would make no sense to tell the world, yeah, we're on a gold buying binge. It's what's coming next. We got to get it. If they did that, they're only making their own life more difficult. But maybe it comes to a point where they say, surprise, this is what we actually do have. And now we're going to peg it to a new system. Oh, wow. By the way, the BIS reclassified it as the world's only other tier one asset. Oh, that's right. So there's a lot of things going on that, I mean, part of the problem that we have is believing everyone is straight up honest with what they're telling us. They're not. Why would they be? They're another country who has their own interests at hand. So I think that's part of the issue here is you have to trust your gut. That's why I say that all the time. People feel that something's not right. And I think even the people who own silver that are pissed off that it hasn't done anything, they feel that they will be vindicated at some point. They know it. They can feel it. They can see it. It's frustrating that all of that feeling and knowing and intuition gets punched in the nose once in a while by the commercial banks who are saying, no, you're wrong. But we're not wrong. They're just trying to hang on to a system that is slipping away. And people would say, well, why don't they just buy everything up? Well, they can't just buy everything up. It takes time. And this is the thing about that portion of the world. The BRICS has been going on for 18 years. They think in terms of decades. We don't. And so they are building what is a generational stockpile of the world's assets. And wealthy people don't have massive bank accounts. Okay, maybe they do, but they have massive stockpiles of assets. And that's what these countries are doing.
Here's a question from Julia Way who says, what is the percentage of gold or silver buyers in the US population?
0.5%, according to Rick Rule. I don't know that to be a fact, but certainly wouldn't surprise me. It's a very small portion. Should be much larger. When Silicon Valley Bank failed and was bailed out illegally, we added 14,000 clients in 45 days. Some were yours, some were Bill Holter's, some were, others, but 45,000, that's 5 years worth of clients. And that tells me the power of fear. Fear and greed are the motivational factors. America has been motivated by greed for too long. We've never been afraid. And I think that's the problem, is that because we are so ill prepared for what I think is coming, largely because the media has kept us in the dark. You're more of a true form of media and journalist than anything you find on CBS or NBC or ABC, and you speak the truth. They don't. So you have all these very well-read people reading the wrong stuff that will get run over by what's coming because they never see it coming. But I think that you can see when things get very scary, like two big banks collapsing and illegally being bailed out. Imagine if they'd been bailed in, what the fear would have been like. All of a sudden, all of these people who had never thought about buying gold before are calling us. But that's just a very small sampling. I think there are very few places left to hide. And if we start to see as we're seeing right now, the short-term rates start to fall, then where do you go? Where are you going to put your money if short-term rates start to really fall and doesn't make sense to hold 60 or 90-day treasuries at 5%? What if it's 2%? Maybe, okay, that's fine. You're still going to get killed to inflation, but you're going to speculate in these overvalued stock indices where the majority of the Russell 2000 is down, where, the bond market hasn't really been a safe place to be, and certainly of any duration. Where are you going to put it? Overvalued real estate. So the point of it is that it's been a little easier right now because of the short-term rates where they are, but that seems to be on the way out as the curve as the yield curve is uninverting, and that, to me, maybe I'm wrong, but I'll tell you what that signals to me. That signals to me the banks having no interest in lending money to you or me or anyone else, and instead they see what's coming, and the banks aren't lending. Instead, they're driving all their money into very short-term interest rates or treasury bills that is driving down the rates. And that's why the curve is uninverting. It's not because the back end of the curve is getting healthy and rates are rising there. It's the front end is going down. And I think this is happening before the Fed does anything. It's because I think the big money knows what's coming, and the big money says, I'm not lending it out to the public. It's too risky. I'd rather buy treasuries and get 5% and lock that in before rates go down. And if it does indeed become a recession, and maybe a very big one. There's a lot of talk that maybe this uninverting, which has had a perfect track record since 1950, maybe it's an archaic statistic that doesn't mean anything anymore. I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if it does turn into a very big recession and the Fed starts dropping rates again, and now all of a sudden that short-term parking place for money disappears, where are you going to go? And I think there are very few places to go. You see trouble. And I think the public at large will wake up to precious metals and will realize that it's one of the few places to go. And so what is a very small percentage now would, I think, likely become much bigger in the future.
We've had a question on the production of American Silver Eagles by the U.S. Mint, and if we have an update on that, and I lost it in the stream. There's been so many questions in the stream, and I should have copied that off on the side before it flew off screen. I've been looking for it. Do we have any indication of whether the U.S. Mint is going to be able to keep up with demand for the American Silver Eagles? Is there any concern about that?
They've done a decent job this year. They just raised premiums by 10 cents. I mean, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're selling millions of them, it is. They've done a decent job so far, but who knows? I mean, typically, let's go back, I've been doing this a long time, and let's go back into, 15 years ago when the thought of this type of environment would never have been in my radar, on my radar, but typically by fall, they run out of product. I mean, that's what they would do. By October, November, they weren't making any more current year product, and they were supposedly preparing for the following year that wouldn't come out until, after January. But oftentimes, by Halloween into November, you start to see things disappear. But when you realize what lies ahead this fall, the big BRICS meeting in October, the meeting for the unit currency in September, and the election in November, God willing, we get there. I think there's a high probability that we see a increased awareness of gold and silver. I'll tell you right now that the Silver Eagles are the best price that they have been since 2020 right now, in my opinion. And it's got to be real darn close to actually the lowest price it's been since 2020. And they've done a decent job this year. They have been the model of inefficiency for 4 years. This year, they seem to be doing a little bit better, but maybe not. Maybe it's just the fact that the American public is asleep at the switch, and I haven't had problem sourcing as much as I want. When you see the outflows coming out of the ETFs, when you realize that the investment demand is not what it was the last few years, it's still strong, but not what it was. Maybe that's masking the truth. I don't know, but I will tell you the supply chain is ridiculously fragile. It is. I mean, what is available today? I mean, a guy like Bill Gates could buy up the whole industry today if he wanted. So it's not as robust as one may think. So it's kind of an interesting question right now when everyone has been looking elsewhere, Nvidia, Bitcoin, Apple, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Great availability. Bank fails tomorrow, can't say that will be the case.
Yeah, that's what we've noticed over the past 3 years. With the first, it was the COVID lockdowns, and it was also the Ukraine invasion, and it was the bank failures. Whenever one of these events wakes up portions of the populace, I won't say wakes
Yeah.
up the whole populace, but wakes up portions of the populace, that our assumptions that all is well and that our kind of stay the course retail financial planner advice type stuff is still valid, is shaken.
Yeah.
That's when we see absolutely mayhem in terms of volume and demand. I wanted to give a chance for you to hit the specials for people before we go back to a few more questions before we wrap here.
I think it's
On
just a junk silver, isn't it?
we've got a few more. We've still got a holdover, I think, on the 10th ounce gold eagles, random years,
Yeah,
uh,
I mean,
$39 over melt.
if I had my choice and I could buy one gold bullion coin, this is what it would be. I Because I've been buying gold and silver every 2 weeks for almost 35 years, I've accumulated a lot of these through the years. Really? Sorry. Um, but I think you can never have too much functionality in your holdings. Whether you're playing poker with your buddies or driving down a crowded highway, you can never have too many outs or exits or options. And the 10th ounce American Eagle gives you that utility in gold that's hard to find elsewhere. The 22 karat also makes them great to handle. Now that's a misconception. You know, a lot of people say to me, well, I should buy gold buffaloes or maple leafs because the gold eagles aren't as pure. That's not true. Let's look at the 1 ounce gold eagle and divide by 10 for this. The 1 ounce gold eagle has 1 ounce of pure 24 karat gold plus a tenth of an ounce of silver and copper alloy to give it strength. So as you know, we can see the maple leaf here, and that maple leaf that you're about to show is pure gold 24 karat. The American Eagle is pure gold 24 karat plus a little alloy. So the net weight of the maple leaf is 1 ounce. The net weight of the American Eagle is 1.1 ounce. That extra weight alloy decreases the purity. So for a standpoint of trading, now the 10th ounce maple leaves come in little plastic things, and if you don't keep them in there, you'll scratch the heck out of them because they're pure. These, you could play poker with 10th ounce eagles all night long and they'd look brand new by the end of the night, where the maples would look 100 years old. So from a standpoint of bartering, trading, utility, the 10th ounce eagle is my favorite, bar none, no question. And of any product I have ever sold, ever in 35 years almost, the 1/10 ounce eagle is the one product that has maintained its premium both buy and sell forever. It is the one product that you always have huge buyback premiums on, 8, 9, 10% over spot. Of course, you're paying more than that when you buy them. That is mint imposed. It is not dealer imposed. The mints charge more money to make these. They make them in small supply. But my favorite come in tubes of 50. And I just think they're great. The maple leaf, yeah, I mean, it's kind of boring, but I hate using boring things for specials, but it's a good value. You know, 24 karat Royal Canadian Mint, very self-explanatory, cheap, and great coin. I personally prefer the American Eagle, but a lot of people like the maple leaf, and it's a great choice, a great price. This is the best value in silver that we have, period. For the last 4 years, these coins have been more expensive than all of the sovereign mint coins. And now this special here puts them cheaper than all of the sovereign mint coins. In fact, you know, for a couple of years, it was just a close second to American Eagles. for this in terms of premium, 10, 11, $12 over the price of silver. We would have paid you darn close to that, sell it back. Uh, this is the best value in silver, period, right now. Bill Holter, my good friend, this is his favorite thing to own, period. And that's because of the utility, because of the functionality, where 14 dimes, if there's 715 ounces in a full bag, it's actually more than that, probably closer to 723, but the industry says 715. If they were uncirculated, 723, but they say 715 because the coins have been run through coin counters for 50 years or whatever, and a little bit wears off. But at 715, if you divide that by 1,000, that would be the per dollar face value. Divide that by 10, and that's what each dime is worth. If you take the exact weight of each dime and multiply it times 14, it's almost exactly 1 ounce. 0.0715 times 14, it's almost exactly 1 ounce. So Bill's point would be, you get 14 transactions here instead of one with an American Eagle. But the point I get across to people, it is by far the best value of any silver item that we can offer you right now, and especially based upon where it's been for the last 3 years.
Yeah, that's one of the things that emerged during some of those wake-up periods, the COVID crisis and the invasion of Ukraine and the bank failures in the US, was people who were waking up or realizing the utility and the usefulness. And again, from our preparedness standpoint, when we talk about I'd rather be 7 years early than one day late in terms of having the asset that I need to make it through difficult times, this is one of those that always emerges as the highest demand. And then it runs out. So when people would call up and say, hey, what are your prices? Not only were the prices high on them, but the availability was very spotty. We struggled and struggled and struggled to keep these in stock. About half the time we didn't have them in stock. People had to wait. So this is one of the things that become very quickly hard to get. People know about toilet paper. They know about bottled water. They know about some of these things that you have to have because you're not going to be able to get them when everybody else wants them. So this is one of those things. It's one of those things that runs out. Any more comments on that before we move on?
No, I mean, I think you're right. I think people, if I were going to tell someone to hurry up, it wouldn't be telling them you got to hurry up because you're going to make a fortune. It would be hurry up because something's going to happen. I mean, I've been saying something's going to happen for a while now, and on your show and others. And what, Trump was almost killed. What, an eighth of an inch separates calm and craziness? I mean, really, are we that close to the razor's edge where, an eighth of an inch, and then all of the inquiries and the ineptitude, and I mean, at some point, massive ineptitude looks more like the plan. And I'm not saying that it is. It just is a fine line here. And so, I mean, if we're that close to all hell breaking loose, yeah, I mean, having something like this is a good idea. I would tell people the hurry, because when the public wakes up, you've seen it, Dunnigan. You've seen it yourself. What is
Mhm.
readily available
Yep.
overnight is gone. There, having 70, 80, $90 million worth of in-stock inventory, that's an awful lot. That's a tremendous amount of money. Sure it is. But when you're doing, many times that in sales per year, is it? And that's with a very small participation in the country. What if all of a sudden everyone wakes up collectively for some, horrible thing, God forbid, or some event that just shakes people and says, I need this,
Mhm.
like that? It's gone. There's a half a dozen big companies in the country. Combined, their inventories are less than $500 million. So, I mean, how fast can that disappear? Fast, when you realize the U.S. government is creating 100,000 in debt every second. It's not a lot of money.
And one last, it was interesting because these are something that disappear really fast when they come up. I'll show it here. Just folks, don't call me a month from now asking if we have these.
Yeah, I just bought 100 of those myself. I think they're kind of neat. They have high premiums, because they're the colored ones like this, and I was offered the opportunity to buy them, so we bought a bunch of them. I think they're neat. They're kind of a piece of history. So I wouldn't buy these for the vanilla ice cream part of my hot
Right,
fudge sundae. Maybe a little
right.
bit more like the hot fudge or the cherry. because of the $6 premium,
Yeah.
you can buy Silver Eagles for that or less. You can buy junk silver for 2.5. You can buy this for 6. So it's more a novelty
Mhm.
type of thing, but a cool one at that. And who knows what, maybe it does really take off in price. Certain things have, and this is certainly a snapshot of history. So who knows? But
I know that
I jumped
one
on
of
it.
the purposes that some people have called asking to for the previous Trump rounds or bars that we
Can't find
had,
them.
they were asking because they use them as a conversation starter with maybe perhaps like-minded people who that they feel like that could open up a conversation. And frankly, that's it's an interesting aspect.
Well, I'll
Others
tell you
have
a
used
quick
silver
funny
diamonds for that.
story. I was invited to play Trump International Golf Course in West Palm Beach, and I've played it a few times now. And one time I played, and we're on the second hole, and Secret Service comes up to us and says, "Come here, guys. I need you to step aside. The president's playing through. He's playing with Wayne Gretzky and Lawrence Taylor and I think Paul O'Neill." And I had said to the Secret Service, I was brought there by someone else, and I had brought 4 Trump rounds to give to the guy who brought me my two playing partners, and I had one as a ball marker. And as the president was coming, I said to the guy, he's got a violin case on his back. I'm like, "Is that a violin?" I'm joking around with him, and he's a nice guy. We're talking, and eight of these guys in golf carts surrounding the foursome that's coming up the course. I said, "Can I give this to the president?" He said, "Probably not." I wanted to give him a Trump round, but yeah, they are very cool for people who understand it. But you can also get punched in the nose if you give it to the wrong person. That's the thing that I hate so much about where we are as a country, is that you're defined by who you voted for in the last election. It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be so polarizing. You can like the policy that the president had. You don't have to love the guy, and you shouldn't be vilified for it. A lot of people do that these days. So, anyways, I'm not going to go down that road, but I think it is a cool conversation piece. Just be careful who you hand it to.
One more question from Nima, who says, "Does Andy recommend Krugerrands?"
I like the silver Krugerrands. If I'm buying gold, I'm buying American Eagles. There's no reason. I mean, the Krugerrand has no face value. So it's kind of like an ounce of gold in my mind. The silver Krugerrand does. Um, they're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. If it were me, I'd buy gold eagles. There are reporting requirements on sellback. If you sell more than 24 Krugerrands at one time, Krugerrands, Maple Leafs, 50 pesos in quantities of 25 ounces or more on one occasion would trigger a 1099. No other gold coins do that. If you were traveling with Krugerrands cross border, it's an ounce of gold. There's no face value. An American Eagle is $50. A Canadian Maple Leaf is 50 Canadian. And so I think they're better choices. I do like the silver Krugerrands, and they are face value. They are IRA eligible. The gold Krugerrands are not. Um, so yeah, I mean, they're fine. I certainly wouldn't have a problem owning them, but if I had my choice, I'd buy American Eagles over just about anything in bullion.
Well, Andy, I wanted to get a chance to remind everyone here. First of all, folks, thank you for helping us make it through the 100,000 subscriber milestone. We got that silver plaque sent to us from YouTube. We're very grateful for that. It's an honor to us, and it's a testimony to everyone who has shared this channel with their friends, coworkers, family members, neighbors, etc., and spread the word. Half of our viewers are still not subscribers. So if you're in that half, just click the subscribe button. It doesn't cost anything. And click the little bell, and YouTube will notify you of every time we post anything. But if you want to make sure also that you don't miss a single episode with Andy, just go to our website, which is libertyandfinance.com, and put in your email address, click submit, and then confirm on the confirming email, and you'll get one email in your inbox per day. We don't share your email address with anyone, but you will get every single interview that we post and all of our weekly specials that Andy comes out with every week to try to make things as affordable as they possibly can be, so that all of our subscribers have the access to be able to get real assets that they're going to need, and do that before everybody else finds out, because by that time, if people are cheering for higher prices, it means it's going to be a lot harder for our friends and neighbors and family and everybody to get the assets that you can get right now at a much lower cost. Andy, just wanted to thank you for being here, taking out the
Of course,
time every week you have. This was actually
always.
your suggestion. I remember this. This is about 4 years ago. You said, "Hey, what about a idea of a weekly market update?" And that's where the idea was born. You just hatched that, and
Well,
here
I
it
love
is.
doing it with you, Dunnigan. You're one of the few people out there that I just would never want to miss an episode. I always tell you how much I appreciate you and your family and the way that you conduct your business and the information you bring to the public. I watch all of your, just about every podcast you do. The people that you bring on are, in most cases, a lot smarter than I am, and I learn a lot from them. So, keep doing what you're doing. It's an honor to be part of it. I wouldn't miss it. I can't wait to come back next Tuesday. I think it's going to be crazy the next several Tuesdays. There's going to be so much to talk about, and hopefully it's all good. But I have a feeling, as the Chinese curse keeps saying, may you live in interesting times. These are interesting and concerning. So I'm honored to ride shotgun with you, as I mentioned before, through these crazy times, and look forward to picking up where we left off next week.
Well, thank you, Andy, and thank you everyone for being here. Make sure you share this widely and help spread the word because we've got to help each other. We're certainly not getting any help from official sources of information. That's one thing we didn't plunge into tonight was about living in the age of deception and betrayal. Andy brushed up against it a couple times, saying that we're not getting helped by what appear to be inept guardians of our society, which are really letting us all down hard. And we need to help each other, lift each other up and certainly take care of business for our families and for our friends and for our children and grandchildren.
No one
So
else is
God,
going to do it for
no
you.
one else is going to do it. So God bless every one of you for being here. Andy, thank you for joining us as
You
well.
got it, brother. All the best to you and everyone else out there. We'll see you next week.